I'm going to do a little coda and then we'll do introductions afterwards in case there's more people trickling in. So there was a couple of success stories about sleeping habits that I would love for you to share for those that maybe had a less successful experience, or I don't know, maybe everyone was successful, but do you want to just start out and
sure.
Yeah.
Well, I took home what you talked about with the cold turkey and the warm turkey, and I went with the warm turkey approach.
You took the warm turkey approach to reteach your child.
And it worked pretty well. It took a few days, but I thought about her wake up time, thought about what time she should be going. I realized something with my daughter is that she will sleep 10 or 11 hours depending on what time I put her down. If she goes to sleep at 8, she'll still sleep till 7. If I put her to bed at 9, she'll sleep till 7.
Depends on for how many days, but yeah, initially that's what you would expect.
Well, she seems to be pretty good about that. So I feel like she needs that extra hour of sleep.
Which means 10, 11 hours?
She won't sleep past 7, between 7 and 7:20, regardless of if I put her down at 9 or 8. So I've been trying to put her down at 8. And we did the whole sit in the chair, mommy's here. I'm going to sit with you in the bed for a minute, and then I'm going to move to the chair. And I held her hand, and we did that for a couple of nights, and she fell asleep. And then I moved the chair further away. And then, I don't know I can't remember exactly how many nights it was, but eventually I was able to put her down and leave the room, and then talk to her from outside in the kitchen, like, mommy's still here, you can go to sleep, it's okay.
Now your daughter is 2, right?
She's 2.5.
2.5.
2.7.
And your main goal was to teach her to not sleep with you?
No, we're still co-sleeping, but I needed her to go to sleep on her own because I need to do things after she goes to bed. I can't go to bed at 8. I have to clean the house, and I have a baby that still doesn't go to bed at 8, so I have to nurse him and give him a bath and all of that. So I couldn't be laying down with her for 2 hours every night while she fell asleep.
Right.
And so we kind of started letting go of how long it takes her to fall asleep. Some nights she falls asleep very quickly, and other nights she lays there for a long time, but she's not crying for us.
Right, good.
So I'm okay with that.
So you've got a regular nighttime sleep. She's falling asleep on her own. Yeah. Later on, she joins you or you join her?
I join her.
Got it.
I get into the
okay.
Yeah.
So you've created a solution for your situation. There was a couple of other success stories. There was one.
Yep, so my son is 3. He has never been a good sleeper, and every advice that I was given was, put him to bed earlier. So he went from, like a 7 o'clock bedtime to a 6:30 bedtime to a 6 o'clock. I tried a 5 o'clock one night. I'm like, this is not working. But then what I found out is, I know that he always wakes up at 6. It doesn't matter what time he goes to bed. He just is an early riser. So when you said to go off of the wake up time and reverse, at his age, he needs 10 hours of overnight sleep and 2 hours during the day for nap, if he's still napping, or 12 hours.
Yeah, those are the ballpark figures.
Well, I know he still needs a nap, and he still naps great during the day. Like he takes 12 to 2 or 1 to 3, But I knew that he always woke up at 6, so I just reversed it back, and that would be an 8 p.m. bedtime. I was trying to put him to bed, and I was fighting for like an hour and a half to 2 hours, and then we would just be angry. His, blood pressure would be raised, mine would be raised, and then we'd be looking at like 10 o'clock at night, and then he'd finally fall asleep. Now that there's no fighting, and I know, he needs to be asleep within 10 minutes after 8 o'clock, we do the bedtime routine later than normal, but what we do a little bit differently, you said like quiet time, chill time after dinner,
right?
But also just to like, noise isn't bad. My husband reminded me that you said noise isn't bad, so we don't have to be like really quiet when we're putting him in. He needs to hear that we're still there. It's not a big deal that we're in the other room, which is the opposite of what I was told when I had him. So now we're like, hey buddy, we're out here, stay in bed type of thing, and he does, and he falls asleep on his own. But the difference is that after dinner we dim the lights. We do this thing where we light the candles around the house, and it's just quiet and dim, and everything's in the candlelight. We brush our teeth in the candlelight. He likes it. He carries his little candle, and it's a whole big thing, but it's like actually better for me and my husband too, because sometimes we're wound up,
So that's a new one for me. I love the candles. That's great. So you figured out 10 hours of sleep at night. You figured out 6 o'clock wake up time in the morning.
Yeah.
So you figured out 8 p.m. bedtime at night.
Yeah.
And paradoxically, when you put kids to bed earlier, they take way longer to fall asleep.
Yeah.
So you've got to put them to bed when they're actually tired.
Yeah, and
so
he's
that
tired at that point,
Good.
Which is so much easier. I mean, yeah, there's some nights where you know, he wants to read the same book 20 times and he's really just stretching the time. But when I see
Mm-hmm.
8 o'clock hit, I'm like, it doesn't matter if we're in the middle of a book, because before I kind of used to make that excuse, oh, well, we're not done, we still have 2 more books, now we're at like 9, 10 o'clock. So at 8 o'clock, I say, okay, that's it. Like, you ran out of time for books. So if he was jumping on the bed the whole time, then that was it. That was.
Oh, that's a great lesson to learn.
Yeah.
You don't want to rob your kid for reading, but actually in this case, it makes sense to do it that
and
way.
I put a clock
Good.
right above his bed. It's a big, big, big one, and I point to the 8, and I'm
Uh-huh.
like, that's it, buddy. And then we
All right.
removed all the lights from his room, because we had
Great.
like, you know, these like star lights that went around and all this like craziness, and yeah, I just.
Yeah, so you really reduced the level of stimulation. You nailed the timing.
Yeah.
So that was great. So for those of you that didn't remember, we talked about sleep last time. So does anyone else want to share a story about sleep successes, or should we get going
Did you
on
guys have one?
seminar number 3?
No.
No?
I was hoping.
Go.
Sorry.
You go ahead.
Yes, sure. So, sorry. For my son, the goal was to remove him actually from our bed, because it's a constant battle to get him to go to his own bed. So
Yeah.
eventually what we did, we got a coat, so you call it coat?
A cot. Mm-hmm.
And also a heavy blanket, I don't know how you
Weighted
weighted
Oh, weighted
blankets.
blankets, sorry. So as you can see, my wife thinks.
Yeah.
But that has helped a lot. But on our routine, we have also dimmed the light as we did, and we have also removed like all the Paw Patrol and all the. He's almost 5 years old.
Okay.
So we removed like most of the stimuli on his room and his bedroom. We also had like the stars, and so we removed all that. But he's still not sleeping on his bedroom. So we have to take the cot to our room. Still, but he's not sleeping on our bed anymore, at least.
Okay. I'm going to call that a variation on the warm turkey approach.
Yeah,
So he's not in your bed, but he's next to your bed.
Yes.
And when you had him in his room, he would just not stay in his room.
He was
Is that what?
staying on his room. We tried that approach of warm, cold turkey. That didn't work. It worked one day or 2 days, but no, that's it. Because he will always wake up in the middle of the night and he will come downstairs to find us.
Yeah,
So if we
yeah.
have the
So
door
if-
closed, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, well, if they fall asleep with you at bedtime, they're going to look for you in the middle of the night when they wake up. So if you want, we can talk offline after the seminar is over and we can clean up those last little tidy pieces. If, in fact, sleeping in a cot in your room is a problem, because it's not a problem for him.
Of course.
Okay, so for the 5-year-old, he's blissfully sleeping in your room. No problem there. Okay, good. I'm glad that there were some successes, though, and I'd be happy to talk with you about any things that didn't work out. If you tried something out that didn't work, I'd want to be able to coach you through that. So today's seminar is on eating. Do you want to? We'll just do a quick round of introductions so everyone knows who everyone is. So should we start here?
I'm Adam. This is Alicia. We have a 3-year-old named Seth. Do you want us to do the kiddo intro too?
Oh, a little bit, if you want.
Right.
Yeah.
So Seth has always had a little bit of trouble with eating. He has a lot of sensory behavior to him.
Mhm.
So like when he was little, didn't like getting applesauce or peanut butter on him.
On his fingers, or
Like on his
Yeah.
fingers, face, anything. Doesn't like being messy. And so right now what we're trying to work through with him is just chewing.
Oh,
like
okay.
taking small bites and chewing carefully. He tends to stuff his food.
Okay,
So, like,
the overstuffer. Okay.
yeah.
So doesn't like slime, doesn't want dirty fingers. So that's what you're calling sensory sensitivities, or is it more complicated than that?
There's that for tactile, and then there's some auditory, like a heightened anxiety reaction to noises that are.
Okay, so
familiar
a
or-
bit too much of a startle response.
Yeah,
And then you're saying he's a picky eater?
no
Okay.
vegetables.
No vegetables, I've heard that before.
Right, I was gonna say that's classic with
Yeah.
toddler. but-
All right. And he's
3.
He's 3, okay. Why don't you introduce
I'm Valine, and I have 2 boys. They are 6 and 4. And I went to these seminars last year, and I have to tell you that what we learned is amazing, because what Dr. Barhan had shared, because we were sitting down at their table for an hour and a half, and it could take up to an hour and a half, and we get our 6-year-old to eat everything. because we knew we could at that point. But at that point, then there's nothing left. There's no time for chill time and sometimes bath time after, you know. But so, you know, sitting down, we basically used his tips, we used your tips, and we were able to reduce the amount of time. But now, like a year later, it's like sometimes you gotta go back to it.
The backward slide.
The backwards,
yeah.
you know, now it's like, you know, we have some changes
Okay.
going on in the family, so
Okay.
there's sometimes, you know, different things going on, but it's just maintaining that, you know, the timer. We have the visual timer going off, and it's like, when time's up for dinner, time's up. And, you know what, if you didn't eat, then...
So the original problem was too long for supper
Yeah.
time, was taking way too much time, and then there was picky eating involved, or the...
Not necessarily picky eating.
Okay.
Yeah,
So you kind of
pretty well.
tidied up the routine, but now you had some family stressors, the routine got disrupted. Yeah, those are very common events in a family's life.
Yeah, and then, I mean, we've had sensory needs in terms of fidgeting, like wanting to, like, not being able to sit down and needing to, like, do something, you know, build. I mean, he used to build a whole train track, we stopped that. And now, you know, the little one wants to do that. He wants to bring 50 cars with them to the table.
To the dinner table.
The dinner
I
table,
see,
yeah.
right, yeah.
It's like too much.
Yeah,
too much
toys
stimulation.
and food are,
Having
not,
that,
yeah.
You know, is also sometimes an issue as well.
It's a great way to prolong the agony. if you want to have a long meal, to bring some toys, you know, right?
So any tips, and I'm sure there's more
All right.
things in there too.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm Matthew. I have an 8-year-old son and a 5-year-old daughter. I'm just hoping to learn a lot of good strategies to use going forward.
Let's see what happens. The number of pearls of wisdom I have to offer are smaller, but that doesn't mean that the problem is easier to solve. So, go ahead.
My son is Hunter. He's 3. Typical toddler. I mean, I nursed him until he was 2.5, so I did the extending nursing. He doesn't really have a problem with any foods, so to speak. Like, he likes vegetables, fruits, all that stuff. He just has a problem now with, like, eating. He just doesn't want to eat. You know, he doesn't want to eat at the table anymore. He wants to play. And so I tell him, you know, if you don't eat now, you don't eat until the morning, and then kind of like a meltdown, almost like he doesn't quite understand. Like, he says okay and runs off and plays, and then doesn't come back. But I think it's because my husband makes it like his duty to get him to eat. You know, he's like, here's, like, I put the food down and I pretend that I'm not even seeing him, and he's eating, and then as soon as my husband says, like, oh, you're eating, like, he stops eating. Like, he makes it his, like, agenda. And we've talked about that, and I said, you know, it's not our job to get someone to eat. Like, if he's hungry, he'll eat. I present healthy food. If he doesn't eat it, he doesn't eat again until the morning. But then when he has the meltdown, it's kind of like, you know, he's starving.
So,
he's
yes,
awful.
oh, I see. Okay, so what you're saying is he doesn't want to come to supper when it's time for supper. He wants to play. And you say, well, fine, but the meal is when it is. And then later on, he's crying because he's hungry.
Yes.
Okay.
But
and
crying, like, you feel awful, like this kid's starving.
pulling at your heartstrings. But I think you attended my seminar last year the way you're talking.
I didn't.
I know.
No, I'm excited about this one.
Okay, let's see what happens.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
My daughter Elizabeth is a little over 2.5 and has never liked eating. I nursed her too, but I mean, she never cried because she was hungry as an infant. I had to just look at the clock and guess, oh, gee, it's been 5 hours. She should probably eat. Never cared about eating, and just does not like to eat. I mean, she'll eat cheese all day long. That she likes. That's the only thing that she likes to eat. And I know she's hungry if she asks for cheese. It's so rare that she'll ask for anything, and if she does, it's cheese. And that's why I know, oh, she's hungry. I have to get some food in her. So then she definitely doesn't want to eat vegetables. That's really, she likes broccoli. That's the only vegetable she likes. I guess my concern is we do a lot of like making her eat, and I know that like I'm starting to hear all these conflicting things about that, how you shouldn't make them eat. And so I didn't know that. My mother-in-law taught us to make our kids eat, so I always would just force feed her, really. Like, you have to eat this. You have to eat this much whole grains, this much vegetables. Like, and I kept her on she's had a very good, well-rounded diet because we have like forced her to. But she's becoming more forceful now and better at refusing, and we're not winning the battles all the time. So, I guess one concern I have is about how much. I read something about kids getting too much protein, and that they're only supposed to get 13 grams of protein at her age, which is her 2 servings of milk exceeds that. So now I'm like conflicted. I'm trying to not let her eat chicken.
Yeah, you can go crazy with the calorie counting and the
Well, I just
yeah.
don't know if it's
Yeah.
okay to let her still eat eggs and chicken. She loves eggs and chicken, but I'm worried that I'm giving her too much protein and her kidneys can't handle it.
Okay, so your question is about the quality of the nutrition.
Yeah.
Yeah, and your question was more about whether he's eating enough.
Well, like
Enough
how to get
calories.
him to eat.
Or how do you get
Yeah.
kids to eat? Yeah.
I mean, I had that question too. I
Okay.
want to know if I get her to eat on her own.
Eating, you mean as opposed to being spoon fed?
No, she'll
Or-
feed herself.
She
but,
feeds
like,
herself.
Sometimes we spoon feed her, it depends.
Okay.
But just to get her to want to eat. So like,
To get her to want to eat at every meal.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So yes, it is a similar experience. My name is Alex. We have almost 2-year-old, and we have Gail, who is on the spectrum. He's 4.8.
Okay.
He is a very bad eater. He's very picky. He doesn't like to eat anything mushy like a mashed potato or anything. He's very sensory, like
Could be.
described.
Mm-hmm.
And if you give him like the plate and wait for him to react to it, he will not even touch it. He wants to keep playing. He wants to go around. He stopped sitting on his chair tight until after he turned 2. So he was like bouncing and trying to get out of it. So we stopped.
Sorry, he was in a what? What was
the
it?
chair, how do you call
The
it?
high chair.
The high
Yeah.
chair.
Oh, the high chair.
So
Okay.
we stopped using the high chair. But he will eat like hamburgers or bacon but he has like this special beige diet, a little bit of rice, a little bit of pasta, but he will not touch the spoon anymore. He knows how to feed himself, but he will not even touch the spoon.
So he's 4.5. He has diagnosis of autism. There are sensory sensitivities. He doesn't eat mushy food. He does eat meat, and he does eat beige foods.
He loves beige foods.
Loves
So
beige foods. Okay.
We stopped going to McDonald's because he's hurting his stomach and he has some sensitivities to milk as well. He has some lactose intolerant. And he also reactive to red dye and others, PhD, MSG.
Mine too.
So he's on a special treatment now called cromolyn, 3 times per day. So it's like a special thing that will give him like stimuli to eat. It's not working.
Which medication is that?
It's called cromolyn.
Cromolyn is it's used for a different reason. I'm interested that you're using it for
Well,
stimulating the diet, but
they're studying if it's mast cell. So eventually
Right.
they're going to check on that. And my little one is also very allergic to
so
corn.
just backpedal for us a little bit. So this is the son who has autism, and now he's being followed by is that a GI specialist or?
Yes.
Okay, and they decided that there could be allergic reactions to which foods?
To wheat.
To wheat?
So he's now on a gluten-free, but
Okay.
he tested negative for celiac disease.
All right.
But there are some consideration of mast cell.
And what made you decide, hey, I better consult with a specialist? What were the problems or the symptoms that you noticed?
Well, we took him to the pediatrician side, English, Spanish. And they made a blood test, they do some
No, but what did you tell the pediatrician that, what was the problem that you were
he
mentioning?
was losing too much weight.
He was losing weight.
Yeah, he was
Okay.
not eating. He's not eating his snacks. He's not eating anything at school. And now they took the wheat. They took all the cheese, and we're left with nothing. Not even McDonald's. He used to love those chicken.
All right, okay.
Um,
Okay, so the diet's become more restricted partly because the physicians have recommended it.
exactly.
Okay, I'm going to just
Of
keep the
course.
conversation going. We're going to hear more about you. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Tracy. My son Dominic is 8. He also has autism, which comes with sensory issues, and he's kind of getting stuck in his ways now. So he used to be a good eater. He would try very unusual things as a toddler, salmon and broccoli. He loved broccoli. But now he's becoming more restrictive.
And just to remind me, the age is what?
8.
He's 8 years old, okay.
So I used to send him a variety of sandwiches to school, and now it's a fight because he wants a bagel every day.
Mm-hmm.
You can't have a bagel for lunch every day without any fruit or anything to go with it. So we're trying to introduce more foods back into.
Okay. So he's 8 years old, he's diagnosed with autism. You think part of it is, part of the food selectivities is because of sensory sensitivities. And do you think his diet is restricted, or do you think it's still fairly broad?
It's becoming more and more restrictive
Okay.
every day.
Great. Okay. Hi.
Hi, I'm Cassandra, and my son's name is Gabriel, and he's 3.5. And when it comes to eating, he has a lot of sensory issues, and he's very picky. He smells things. It's a lot about texture. Right now, like he's still just eating yogurt, and every once in a blue moon he'll have cream of wheat, but it's pretty much 10 yogurts. Like it's crazy. And he cannot sit down to eat. We're still having the same problem. He won't sit. He won't eat. He's constantly in movement. He has to be doing something to even be fed. Feeding himself is actually a big problem because he doesn't eat that much, like that requires utensils. So when he does, he'll like spill it. So I'm still having to do it for him.
You need to spoon feed him, or because if he tries to spoon feed himself, what happens?
He drops it all.
He drops it all. Okay.
Yep.
And he's 3.5. You said. Okay.
Yep.
And then do you think the repertoire of foods is quite constrained, or does he eat a wide range?
Like he smells something he doesn't like the smell, he'll push it away.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's some challenges there.
Yes.
Okay. Do you want to share any stories with me?
Yeah, hi, my name is Ryan. I have a 3 and a 6-year-old. My 3-year-old, well, starting just going for my 6-year-old, he's been diagnosed with a social emotional disability. So he's always had a hard time just like picking up a utensil and just eating with the utensil. There was just a lot of like wanting to eat with his hands.
Okay.
A lot. We've been really working on that, like trying to use the utensil. He also has ADHD, so at the table he's also just very much in movement. You know, the legs always moving, just having a hard time just actually sitting in the chair. At school they have like some accommodations for him. They put like a band or something on like the chair, and you know, he's asked for us, you know, if we could have some sort of modifications, but I don't really know like where to go about getting some sort of band, like those kind of accommodations that they have.
Your son has asked for accommodations at home?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
what is he asking for?
Like they have like a band or something like on his
right?
desk chair that he can like bounce his feet up and down on. So he's but I don't know how to go about like finding that out, or maybe I should just reach out to the school. But we've kind of like just sort of insisted that he just try to sit and just eat. Our meals also go extremely long. I think there's a lot of talking at the beginning of the meals. It's just hard to just get.
He's talking with you, or the whole family's talking?
He's talking to the whole family. My younger daughter is 3, and she also has similar qualities about her. She also has a hard time sitting still at the table. Like a lot of like kneeling in the chair, like legs on the side. She's even worse with utensils. Just really trying to get her to use her utensils is really hard. I think she can use her utensils to eat, but she prefers not to.
Okay. A
little bit of sensory texture issues with her. Like if I give her peanut butter, like she, you know, doesn't like it on her fingers. She'll try smearing it.
So your son is how old?
He is 6.
He's 6. And so your main concern is what? That he's not taking in enough calories?
No,
or?
my main concern is how do we get to eat, like as a family? Like one, the meals are just too long.
Okay.
And then the other piece to it is like, you know, like how to, like in terms of if you have a child who's fidgety and always wanting to move around, how do you get them to just sit at the table and
So it's the quality of the experience more than the nutrition. Okay. Yeah. So those are great questions, and you're really covering the gamut of the things that I usually talk about in the clinic, minus the cromolyn. That's a new one for me. So thank you for bringing that one to our group today. If you look at the IEP for Home online, there's 4 questions related to eating. That self-assessment thing that is posted doesn't cover everything, but the first question is, I have to remember this now, the first statement is about we eat on a schedule. The second question is, my child eats a range of foods, eats different flavors and textures of food. The third one is my child eats a healthy diet. And the fourth one is my child has good table manners. So, you know, chews with the mouth closed, uses utensils, etc. So I think we're covering some of those here. There's probably a couple that are missing, okay? And the purpose of the assessment tool is just to get a sense of, well, what are you working on? Because I think, you know, not taking in enough calories and having a really restricted diet is a much more important thing to work on than table manners. But I definitely want you to work on table manners if you're there and, you know, if your kid is ready for that. So we'll try to cover all of those topics. The first thing that I usually talk about with families about eating is that you have to have it on a schedule. And it's really so we talked about schedules when we talked about sleep last time. And I'm just going to assume that all of you have nailed down your morning wake-up time and you've got at least the sleep on a schedule. The next thing that you've got to work on is getting eating on a schedule. And you want to have meals at the same time every day with really no flexibility, okay? 3 meals. And then you want to have between 1 and 3 snacks per day, depending on how old your child is and, you know, how well they're eating, whatever. The timing can be slightly more flexible, but not that much, okay? A great rule of thumb that usually works really well is meals are controlled by the amount of time you spend on them, not by how many calories your kid's supposed to eat. So meals are always 20 to 30 minutes. You'll have to decide what works best for you. You could make it as short as 15 if you have a toddler, but you want to time limit meals, and then you want to the kids can access whatever food they want during the meal, right? But when the 15 or 30 minutes are over, the food gets packed away, we're all done. If you notice that your kid is still eating after 30 minutes, which would be a little bit unusual, you could stretch it out a little bit. But really the idea is you don't prolong the agony. You make the meals, you know, relatively short and sweet. I want you to set yourselves up for a pleasant conversational experience. We'll work on that down the road. But the kids need to know that there's an end in sight. That's really, actually probably you do too. So one thing is the meals are controlled by time. The snacks are controlled by the number of calories. The snacks are 1 piece of food. So half of an apple, 1 granola bar, you know, 3 carrot sticks, whatever you choose is the right size snack. The kids can take as long as they want to eat it, but it's controlled by number of calories. They don't get to ask for seconds for snacks, okay? So, hi, come on in. So having said that, any quick reactions to the scheduling the scheduling ideas that I just mentioned? And a couple of you have very prolonged meals, and I'm curious to know what you're going to do with this idea, if anything at all.
We've tried to have the schedule.
Okay.
We've tried to do the 20 minutes.
For the meals.
For the meals.
Yeah.
And I have found that, like, my kids will, and we've tried to do this silent eating approach to try to encourage eating for the first, like, 10 minutes or something. That doesn't really work with my 2 kids. They just always want to chat. It's like agonizing for them not to talk. So, but we've tried the silent eating approach. But what I've found is that when, you know, like, they don't want to eat, and then all of a sudden when they realize, like, oh, we're gonna leave, then it's like, oh, okay, let me hurry up and eat, or I'm not finished, and like, that's always the issue, is how it's always taking too much time. It's like they don't want to eat for the longest time, and then all of a sudden, like, when it's about to be packed up and we're about to be finished, then now all of a sudden they want to eat. I don't know what to do.
Interesting. All right. What do other people think about time-limited meals and calorie-limited snacks? Does that sound realistic? Does that sound crazy?
I never really thought of it as time limited, just because, you know, we could sit at the table, and my husband and I go back and forth, and, you know, he's not eating. Well, don't make it your agenda to eat. Well, but he only ate 2 things. I'm like, but he ate that, and, you know, we're literally right in front of him. The 2 of us are going back and forth about it, and then he's just like looking at both of us and not eating, and then I look at the clock and I'm like, it's been 40 minutes now. It's going on an hour. And then I used to say, we'll save it for later, because that's what our old pediatrician had said was okay. But we're not saving it for later anymore. I'm like, okay, if you're not finished in the next 5 minutes, because now I'm getting angry, you know, I'm getting like angry, like it's going in the trash. And then I run over and I throw it in the trash at 5 minutes. It's a huge meltdown. And he opens the trash can and he's, you know, trying to pull out the food.
Oh
my,
my, yeah, right,
horrible.
right.
So
okay.
if the timing thing. Instead
Yes.
of me saying, okay, it's been 40 minutes, another 5 minutes, another 5 minutes, if I just make it a routine that it's dinner's at 5:30 and it's over at 6, whether you eat or not, I think he would understand that if I kept it the same.
Most of them would. Most of them would. I'm actually very interested in the dilemma that you have about the kids wanting to talk. I think it's completely adorable. I don't think I've run into that problem before. And I have an idea to share with you, but before I share that, what do other people think about a time-limited meal? Is that going to work or make things go kerbonkers?
I think like I said, last year I learned that from you, and it was great. I started applying it like the next day. It's difficult when you have another parent involved. My husband was not for it because he wants to make sure he eats, which I told him our kid would eat. The 6-year-old would eat everything. I mean, we could literally put almost whatever we want in front of him and get him to eat it, but we'd sit there for almost 2 hours.
Because he was playing with the food or just experimenting with it?
Yeah, playing, and doing this or that, and just keep eating. But I mean, now, hearing everybody else's things, I mean, we have other issues as well. Like, he doesn't, he's almost 7, and he's hardly eating with a utensil anymore. I didn't even think about it until somebody else brought it up. I was like, oh yeah,
okay.
He's been eating with his mouth.
Okay.
And with his hands,
But your first goal, the easiest thing to do is to do what I just said, and then you have to deal with the ramifications of what I just said, right? You've got to make it work for you. But meals are not supposed to be agonizing. You really want to uncouple eating with agony. You don't want those two things going together, right? And you want to make them pleasant and, not too prolonged. And the kids are allowed to not eat. What you're also doing with the schedule, in addition to reducing the agony, is you're really stimulating hunger. But you're stimulating hunger to occur at predictable times. And it really helps the kid in terms of their circadian rhythms and their what I call a physiological routine, and even just how your brain releases hormones at the right time in preparation for eating and for digesting. If you don't have the meals on a schedule, your brain isn't trained to sort of get ready for food, and your gut isn't ready for food either, and so it's going to be activated at all sorts of different times. One of the anchors that I try to create with families are the anchors of the schedule, which we're going to talk about next month. But it starts with sleeping and eating, and having a really rigid routine, which really means when you say supper is at 6, it's at 6. It's not at 6:15, it's at 6, okay? It's not at 5:45. Same thing with the other meals. It actually really helps a lot of families to have those anchors. So you want...
Another thing that you did, that you had suggested was, and you were talking a little bit about this as well, is actually, okay, so if they don't eat in that time, in the 20-30 minute time range, to set the food aside. This is what I've been doing since I've learned this last year. As I'm like, okay, well, time's up. The timer went up. Dinner's over, and you're not eating. You're bouncing off the wall, doing all these other things. So that's your choice. You have a choice. You're obviously not hungry. Here you go. Your food's here. So basically, it's set right there. You're not going to get your snack. You're not going to get a
Well, you'll get a snack if there was a snack that's scheduled, but it's just the snack that you predetermined. Okay, you want to encourage a little bit of starvation here. I'm being a little bit facetious in saying that, but you want to really stimulate hunger, because by the time the next meal comes, they probably are going to eat, and they're probably going to eat sooner and more efficiently. And you start to build that sort of get through the meal a little bit more efficiently skill over the course of a few days. It's not going to take a huge amount of time, but it would probably take a few days. So you want to stimulate the appetite so that they're actually ready to eat at the time that the meal was scheduled to occur. The kids who are grazing, they're never really ready to eat because they're never particularly hungry. You want to stimulate the appetite so that they eat more efficiently, and then you can have some leftover time for conversation. I'm going to throw a suggestion out for you. I'm delighted by the fact that your kids want to talk with each other. There's lots of families that probably would be jealous of that. And I'm wondering if you just need to have a family get-together or a kid get-together for 15 minutes of conversation time before you transition to the meal. I don't know. I'm just throwing that idea out there. But I would want the meal to be a little bit on the shorter side, not the 45 minutes to an hour or whatever, because you're just prolonging for how long are they taking food in, for how long is your gut working on digesting food, for how much less time is it till the next food's available. You want to reduce all those variables, and make it much tighter. Go ahead.
A couple of thoughts came to mind.
Yeah.
In terms of the schedule, well, first, I thought, yeah, the schedule is the big one. We just have a different schedule every day. So it's just hard for me to, it's going to be a real, I feel like it's going to be really hard to try to, I would like to try to do it, but it's just, I think it's going to be challenging. We have like different people, like my mom and my mother-in-law taking care of the kids on different days. And, my son goes to a chiropractor some days at lunchtime, so we're on the go. And then there's, you know, some days she doesn't fall asleep for her nap at the same time. So then she wakes, like she eats lunch after the nap. And it's just, there's so many variables in our schedule. So like there's certain nights that we go to my parents for dinner, and so then dinner is ready when my mom has finished cooking. And like, I just, how does like everybody handle sticking to a schedule when like your life, I feel like none of my days look like the day before, like every day.
Right. That's a big consideration. And I think because there's so many more things we can do with our lives these days, we tend to really short shrift the schedule. I'm a big fan of schedules.
Yeah.
I just think and especially for young kids, I think it really helps them to make sense out of the world. The world feels predictable and comforting because you always know what's going to happen for those, I call them the anchors of the day. So one anchor is wake up time, one anchor is bedtime, and the other important anchor is the 3 meals. And the snacks are probably a little bit less critical.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. I'm a school teacher, and I see my students needing those anchors too.
Yeah. So either you make some compromises and you say, well, I'm just not going to do certain things at certain times because I'm going to dedicate that time to the meal, and everything stops and we're just going to eat.
Yeah.
Or you'll have to make some compromises around.
I have to get a lot of people on board.
Yeah.
It's not just me.
Yeah, it's complicated.
There's
Absolutely.
a lot of other people involved in.
Yeah.
And also because my parents and my in-laws like to just give her this and give her that, even though we say like not to give her things.
Right.
Just, oh, but she wanted a cookie, or oh, she wanted. So
yeah, right. No, it's complicated. The other, I mean, one of you mentioned just having your spouse on board. That's complicated enough as it is, right? And the other one is having
here in spirit. He's all for this, but
good.
We didn't have a sitter.
Good. Okay.
The other thing though is I think that's going to be hard for me is to get off of did she get 4 servings of veggies and fruits and 2 servings of whole grains, and did she get like, I feel like I don't know if I'm obsessive about it, but I'm just like, has she had enough dairy? Has she had enough fruit? Has she had enough?
Right. So let's talk about the quality of nutrition in a minute. So the first thing is just the number of calories, but I didn't touch on that. Don't worry about the number of calories that your kid takes in. It's way too hard to start counting calories. It doesn't work. And the pediatricians don't care anyways, okay? So what the pediatricians really care about is your child growing, yes or no? And you should ask your pediatrician for a look at the growth curve if they don't show it to you already, and really reassure yourself, wow, my kid's growing normally. Because if you know that for a fact, and it's a very easy fact to establish, if you know for a fact that your child is growing normally, you're going to throw out of the window a lot of your fears about, is my child eating enough calories? It's just way too hard. Let your child figure that out for himself or herself. So that's another reason why I say what I say about the scheduling, is just let them figure it out. The other thing is preschoolers starting around age 3, the amount of food they eat per body weight goes way down, right? So they're really slowing down on their eating. They're not growing as rapidly. And they will go for a day without eating just 1 meal. And it can really make parents feel worried and nervous. But it's really normal. And the only thing you can hang your hat on is my child growing? You can't fuss over how many calories your child ate that day. You're gonna go crazy with it.
Or what those calories are.
Pardon me?
Or what those calories
we're gonna
are.
just talk about calories for now, okay?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
In regards to the schedule, can you schedule a snack after dinner?
Yeah, it depends on what you think, how many snacks your kid needs. Young kids actually do need to eat a bit more frequently than 3 times a day. So you want to just build that in. I think a snack after school is very appropriate or reasonable for a young school-age child. And then they often get a snack at recess in the mid-morning, and potentially they might need one after supper, okay? But you want to have it some distance away from bedtime so that you can do, dental hygiene and separate that from the bedtime. It may not even fit into the schedule if your supper happens to be late.
Right. And then the other question was, do you suggest putting an alarm on your phone so that your child hears it go off and they're like, okay, it's snack time? Because honestly, until I wrote out a routine, I would forget what's next and is it what time?
Yeah. I would do the alarm bell for me as the as the adult. Yeah, I don't think your kids need it.
Because sometimes he doesn't
But-
get any snacks during the day, you know, and I'm like, oh my God, you've eaten breakfast, you took your nap, you haven't even eaten lunch, like, you just gets crazy. You're like, oh my God, I haven't eaten all day, like, I'm
Right.
about to pass out.
Right.
Maybe I should
Yeah.
eat.
Yeah. No, I think it's hard on kids actually. I think they're much happier with that regularity, and probably they kind of make their parents happy too when they're more regular. Okay, so the next thing is how do you then introduce a broad repertoire of foods? And I have a very large number of families tell me that their child is a picky eater, but not 100% of those cases do I agree with the family that the child's a picky eater. There are a lot of, because kids are picky eaters, right? And I don't always worry about the parent's description. I usually get into the details of, well, tell me how much your child eats, which different foods does your child eat, give me some examples. And then they start to name all these different foods and I'm thinking, oh, sounds like pretty good eating behaviors to me. That said, there really are some kids out there that have sensory sensitivities and are very picky eaters, and the issue of nutrition becomes, like the quality of the nutrition becomes a bigger issue. It's not as common as you might think. I think that most picky eaters are probably, quote, normal picky eaters. There's a couple of reasons why kids end up being picky. The most important one is developmental. Toddlers just haven't been exposed to all the foods there are in the world, or infants for that matter. And one of the basic teachings of your well child visits with the pediatrician is to expose your child to new flavors and new textures of food. Paradoxically, there's a bit of a thought that because we're so concerned about allergies during the first year that we're kind of creating a culture of selective eating habits. I don't know if that's been documented, but it's an interesting question to be asking. Are we being overly concerned about allergies and overly concerned about introducing foods too slowly at the expense of then having the kid feel comfortable with lots of different foods and having a good repertoire? That said, it takes, between 5 and 15 trials of a new food before a child incorporates it into her repertoire or his repertoire. So when the toddler throws away the first time that you showed corn or, whatever, lettuce or whatever, don't take that as the final answer. You've got to keep going back with those new foods and make sure that they keep having exposures to those foods so that they can then incorporate it into their food repertoire. And the exposure for toddlers often is playing with it, holding it in your hands, putting it in your mouth, not necessarily swallowing it. We do the same strategies for older kids who are picky eaters, but it's a developmentally normal part of learning how to acquire new food preferences and accept new flavors and new textures of foods. So you just want to keep offering lots of different kinds of foods. The kids will take it in. They're going to have some preferences. There is a tendency for kids to not like really strong flavored foods. Although I'm always interested that kids like broccoli and cauliflower. Those are strong flavors, and I don't know, some kids really like it. They might like it because it's crunchy.
I love spices, so I had to cut that back.
You had to cut back on spices because your kids were not so into spices. Yeah.
I love spices. I love just, yeah. He does.
It'll come. You can introduce the spices later still.
Yeah.
Not a problem.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
He even said last night, Daddy, I don't want the red burger because I don't want the red burger. I want it dry and brown because we made ground beef with tomato sauce and onions, and he didn't want the onions, not the tomato sauce. And he specifically said that. I was blown away.
Yeah, no, it's so kids can get very specific and they can really sort of pick through and pick out all the onion pieces and pick out all the pepper pieces, etc. So, giving foods that aren't mixed up could help because then they actually taste each of the individual foods and you can figure out if there's certain preferences that you might decide, okay, well, I'm not going to push this one. I don't need him to eat onions necessarily as long as there's, intake of vegetables. But you just want to have that exposure. And for kids who already have developed sort of more picky eating behaviors, you just want to roll the clock back, start to introduce a wider range of foods and see how far you get with that. There was another comment that I was going to make about the repertoire. It'll come back to me in a minute. Anyhow.
What about like texture too? My 6-year-old doesn't want to eat. He's kind of always been this way. He prefer vegetables if they're raw,
Yeah.
And then now it's just like he's very kind of picky. It's like only a few.
They-
There's only a couple varieties.
Yeah, so I actually do see that, and again, more commonly in the kids with autism, where they start out by having a reasonable repertoire of food, and then it starts to get narrower over time. In a weird way, it's probably a developmental accomplishment on their part, because they're starting to realize that they have some say over what they do with their lives, right? So as their understanding of the world improves, they start to realize that they have some power over, I can say no, you know, which maybe doesn't help the cause of eating a healthy diet, but in some ways it's a developmental accomplishment. So what problems do some of you foresee just offering a wider range of foods?
Well, I went to a speech therapist or whatever, and she was saying, so mine had like 5 things that he would eat. Everything else he would discard.
5 foods,
literally,
period.
Like eggs, like literally 5
Okay.
foods. And so she said if you kept giving them those foods, they do this thing where they stop eating it, like dropping the foods, like eliminating those foods at a certain, like as soon as they get older. So I got really scared. And I was like, okay, so the schedule works really well with both of my kiddos. My husband, they do whatever they want with my husband, but when it's me, they know, you know, we're at school, because I work at the school too. So they're like, oh, mom's here, you know. Or the teachers are buddies with me, so they know, you know. But they don't, they're both like certain textures, certain smells. Like my 3-year-old, he's very sensitive to smells, everything. Like even I changed my deodorant, and he's like, "You're stinky, mommy." And I'm like, "No, it's just this new smell. It's a spring smell, whatever." And he's like, "I don't like your spring smell, you know." And we'll go back to the other one. So for the foods, he's very like that. Even if I mix it in, like he can tell.
Right.
So we did the whole 15 to 30 tries.
Good.
She said the older they get, it takes longer to
That's true.
switch them up.
That's
so
true.
That scared me too. So then, so we do it, and he's tried like corn and all of these things literally 30 times. We have a little bingo card, and you know, he gets to check off which one he tried and all of this stuff. Pediasure actually had it in their website, so that helped. And he thinks it's fun, and he does the, you know, smell, touch, put it on his lip, and then taste with his tongue, and then actually eat it. So we go through these little steps, and it's fun, and I hate it, but they told me, you know, it works or whatever. Yeah, I did it when he was 9 months, and then I backed out after 3 months because it was like all over my wall. So I was like, this isn't working. I don't like it.
So you're a couple of steps ahead of me in what I want to share with the group. So I'm going to pause you for a second, okay? So and I remember what it was that I was going to say earlier. One cause of picky eating is that the kids are getting junk food because that's what they end up eating, and then it makes you as a parent feel confident that they've at least eaten. So you have to get out of that rat race, if you want to call it that. So the schedule of the food is going to simulate the hunger. Whatever food is there, they will be stimulated to eat it. If they have a diet of McDonald's and you're trying to wean them off McDonald's, they will absolutely refuse your high quality nutrition, but probably only for a couple of days until they're really hungry. You do need to let your kids starve a little bit if they just have really bad eating habits. Now, if you're working on improving your eating habits, the approach that I just told you is the cold turkey approach for eating, which is, I don't have any, you know, macaroni and cheese today. All that I have is the food that I made for you, which is meat and potatoes. So that's what we're going to have today. And there's no way around it. You have the option of not eating, or you eat the food that I've prepared for you. And a lot of kids will shut down and not eat anything, typically not for more than a day or two, and then they would start to eat the foods that you prepared, and that's just your new household rule. Now, that's actually not universal. Very, very few kids stop eating to the point of losing weight, but there are some kids that really stop eating and they lose some weight. I mean, so it's something that, you know, I don't always know in advance which kid is which. So the sort of the slightly less cold turkey approach is to say to kids, you're going to eat half of a cup of whatever food I made, whether it's, you know, like 4 tablespoons of potato and 3 tablespoons of corn or whatever. I'm going to make you eat something that the family's eating. And after you've done that, which is probably going to be about half of your meal anyways, you can have some of the foods that you prefer, the white bread or the beige diet or whatever, just as a top up. But you want to start to really incorporate a lot more of the new foods. usually what I tell families is try to use foods that are reasonably kid-friendly. New foods that kids would typically like typically they like corn, they typically don't like cauliflower, but you know, you get these exceptions. And you try to get a range of foods in there. So vegetables, fruits, grains, dairies, and meats, okay? So now we're gonna go to what I call the true picky eaters, like your children, and figure out, okay, well, what do you do with the kids that really are very sensitive? They're just really overwhelmed by the odors. I'm hesitant to say that all kids are that overwhelmed, especially after they've been exposed many times. Sometimes it's kind of habitual. Oh, I can tell that's that food that once smelled bad for me, so I'm just going to refuse it right away. And you have to really encourage them to get used to those flavors and textures and smells again. Preferably, you still go by the, okay, 1 tablespoon of the new food, and then I'm going to concede and give you the food that's not necessarily so healthy. And work on that. That's a much slower approach. But if you really do that every day, 3 times a day, once per meal, think about it. At the end of a year, you've done 1,000 new food trials. That's a huge number of food trials. So within a year, your kid could... You look tired, but within a year, you could really be, your child's food repertoire is really expanded by then. And you can start to lean on them much more and say, well, you know what, we're not gonna do the pasta meal today. You're gonna have to eat, you know, for today, you're gonna have to eat the food that we prepared, okay? For very picky eaters, it sometimes has to go more slowly. And there is a little bit of saving grace in here. Like I have run, it's very rare, but I have run into kids that literally lose weight because they refuse to eat. And that makes everybody nervous. And that actually makes pediatricians nervous too, by the way, right? Because we do not like kids losing weight. That's just goes against the grain. But for those kids that are super picky, that have 5 or 10 foods and that's it, like it has to be, you know, a certain brand of bread, and it has to be a certain brand of yogurt, and that's all they eat. What my observation is, and this is not based in sort of a scientific review, but it's just based on the kids that I see in my practice, they do drop one of those foods, but then they add a new one. And over the course of 3 to 4 months, their 5 foods shifts from these 5 foods to these 5 foods, and then it shifts to these 5 foods. So somehow over the course of a year, somehow their body recognizes that it needs to eat a slightly bigger variety of foods. So I don't like it when I see that. And very commonly, the super picky eaters are also eating a very low fiber diet. They start to get into problems with constipation and soiling. There's a whole negative spiral downwards with this, but some of them are growing and some of them are surviving. And then I don't try to push it too much harder, except I do refer those kids to specialists, to eating specialists, to see if they would have any more luck than what my kind of standard line, well, typical recommendations are. So any comments to those, that piece, that information?
Have you noticed any, or have you had any success stories with behavioral changes when the diet is changed like that? With the schedule, with the diet, with the snack, with the this, you know? Okay, so your question has more than one question embedded in it. Okay, so what so your question is, when kids eat a better diet, do their behaviors improve? Okay, and the thing is that if kids are on a schedule, meals are not a cause of frustration. They're generally a positive event. You're eating healthy foods. You have normal bowel habits. I would say probably you feel better and you're going to perform better in life. Yes, okay? But there are several components there that could account for the improvement, right? So it's not just that, you know, you're now eating carrots every day, right? The other comment that I would make, because it's a great question and it's one that comes up quite often, is if I put my child on a gluten-free diet, like we're going the other way now, we're doing some restricting, or if I take all the dyes out of my child's diet, is that going to improve the child's behaviors? And I said, listen, it's a great theory, and in the past I would also say, I would love it if you would do a gluten-free diet because it's a very healthy diet. It's actually, that's changed now because there's so many gluten-free products available that I'm not sure about the quality of the nutrition anymore, okay? But some of those diets, like removing all dyes from any food that you give, it's a healthy diet. So I'm kind of reluctant to say there's no scientific evidence that this works because I know that it's a healthy diet that could probably be a healthy thing for the kid, right? But it's really hard to make a good correlation. It's hard to know, when I changed the diet, did the behaviors change? Did you think about which behaviors were supposed to change? Like, was it lower number of
Sorry?
We removed all dyes in the past.
You
2
removed all dyes from
I
your
went through
kids' diet?
everything in the cabinet.
Uh-huh.
I don't buy anything with dyes. And I was like, what you just said, do I see a difference? I'm like, I think I do. I
Right.
mean,
Right, it's really hard. It's really hard to figure out when I change the diet, do my child's behaviors improve? You have to have a sense of, well, what is it that you're looking to improve? If your child is hyperactive, that could be one thing. If your child is having a lot of intense tantrums, that could be one thing. And you have to have a way to count up, well, how bad or how problematic was it before the diet changed? And then maybe a month or 2 after you've been on a new diet, do you see an improvement? And it's just a hard correlation to make. But my thinking is, certainly in the past, I might have changed my thinking now, is that if you have a healthy diet, the whole family has to be put on a schedule. When you're starting to do all of your own food preparation, it changes how the family functions, because you've got to buy the groceries on time, you've got to create the meals on time. There's a whole set of behaviors that change in the family, and I think that can sometimes have a really positive influence on the child.
yeah, that's
So, go ahead.
Question. My mother-in-law got us making soups a lot for my daughter to get her to eat like vegetables, and so we make a lot of soups and we blend them with avocado because I find that she'll eat anything if it's blended with avocado.
Oh, I would too. Yeah.
It's a lot yummier with a little cilantro and avocado. She'll take an Italian soup, and if it's blended with cilantro and avocado, she'll eat it. But so that she ends up having a lot of greens that way and vegetables and
Yeah.
you know some meat and some grains or whatever we put in the soup. But is that hurting her ability to like those foods because she's
It's a great
eating them
question.
blended, you
Yeah.
know?
What's the other? You're camouflaging the vegetables. Yeah.
We do that because we're trying to get some nutrition in her.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm thinking if I were to take those foods out in isolation, she wouldn't touch them.
She might not. But have other people done that? You're camouflaging. Yeah, yeah. There's cookbooks, and if you go online, there's like there cauliflower pizza dough crusts, and there's interesting ways. No, I would go for it. I think that if it helps to expand your kids' food repertoire, I think it's great.
Until your child starts to realize it.
Yeah.
What did you put in the smoothie?
Yeah, right. No,
the
right.
the one that has the sensory.
Right. But also, just think about.
He goes, what are these floating things? And then my son goes, hey, what am I eating? I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
spinach.
Yeah, no, but that's typical. So once the kids have identified the food, then it's no longer edible for them. Yeah.
Your soups, are there like a blended soup? Then
Well, it's not for at first. We eat it unblended, but we
sorry.
blend it for her
But you blend
with
with the-
avocado.
with the
because she loves
avocado.
avocado.
Okay.
I was just clarifying that, just like
Yeah. So I think those are all reasonable strategies. And then should we move to the table manners question? Are we ready for that one? Does that seem like pie in the sky?
Can you answer the question about protein real quick?
Okay, protein. What was your question again?
So my daughter has she likes her milk. She has 2 servings of milk a day. And that's 16 grams of protein.
Mm-hmm.
So I read that toddlers should have no more than 13, that we're giving our toddlers too much protein and their kidneys can't handle it. She also likes chicken and she likes eggs, and so lately I've been trying to not give her chicken and eggs. I don't know if it's okay for her to still have.
That's a good question. I don't know what the general pediatricians would say, actually, and that would be a great question to ask your general pediatrician if the guidelines have changed. So when I was still working as a general pediatrician, and up until very recently, certainly, the teaching was much simpler. Is for any kid, you don't give more than 24 ounces of milk a day.
And she's only having 16.
And she's only having 16, right? But certainly up to 24 ounces would be very common. I do run into picky eating behaviors for kids that are drinking like 40 ounces of milk a day, because that's going to really cut your appetite for anything. So it's a good thing to have a restriction on. And I've never worried about the protein content. I actually think you're onto something. I think that in the Western world, we certainly eat too much meat. And I think that there is kind of a movement towards eating a much more plant-based diet for ecological reasons, but also for personal health. So I'm going to be curious to know if that becomes a more clear recommendation. But as far as I know, it's not yet become like a recommendation from the American Academy of Pediatrics, for example. Okay? Go ahead.
I think you touched upon it, but just limiting bad foods or bad quality foods at the dinner table, so white bread.
Yeah.
For some reason, if they could make the free choice, they'll eat 4 pieces or 4 rolls and won't touch anything.
Mm-hmm.
So am I okay to limit that to, one, we kind of try to stop doing it, but just limit it to 1 piece of bread, but then you can have as much chicken and smoked broccoli as you
Yeah.
want.
So I haven't researched this carefully. Okay. So, but what I am aware of is a couple of things. So the foods that are so-called bad foods are usually high sugar, high fat. And sugar means also just carbohydrates that you can quickly metabolize, like refined wheat flour is the most common example. The reason why we love those foods so much is because we immediately get the sense of having eaten something. We get a quick return on the investment, if you want to call it that. And our body quickly recognizes, hey, I've been eating something. I feel sated by it, okay? Now the problem with those foods is that it's quick to burn out, and then you don't get sort of more sustained energy from it. And what the public, I read this on a Harvard School of Public Health website, was just how important whole grains are, because they take longer to digest. It takes longer for your body to break them down, and there's this trickle of sugar that enters into your bloodstream over several hours. So you actually feel nourished for longer, even though it takes you like about a half hour before you feel like you've had some food, because it takes longer for the food to get digested and to enter into your bloodstream. So I don't make this a formal recommendation, but I think whole grains and foods that are not wheat-based, certainly not refined flour, are healthier because they give you more sustained energy. And meats can do that too, but they take more energy to digest. And there is some literature, I'm not sure if it's mainstream yet, to say that excess of protein is a problem. But again, I don't think it's trickled down to the level of the American Academy of Pediatrics saying, this is what you need to be doing. So does that answer your question?
Well, so we can limit it then if we see them wanting to eat 4 rolls and not anything else.
Yeah,
Limit that.
Yeah. I guess the point that I wanted to make is give more foods that have more sustained energy.
And then you won't run into that problem.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's easier on the pancreas if you don't get this rush of sugar entering into your bloodstream that your pancreas has to then, rapidly produce some insulin to metabolize it.
It's like when you
That's
go
one
out
of
to eat
these
and you
areas.
keep asking the waiter to bring you the bread as an adult, and then you have too much bread, and then you gotta eat.
Then you don't feel so hungry then, yeah. The last one though is table manners, and it's going to be a lot easier if you're not worried about the calories. If you figured out that your kid is eating a reasonable repertoire of foods, you have the meals on a schedule, you're not sort of making it a long, agonizing event, it's going to be much easier for you to start to work on the other parts of eating behaviors, which are important. How do you eat using an eating utensil? How do you eat with your mouth closed? What are good table manners? Those are important. They're really important for your social interactions, and I think it's important to think about them. I don't usually have the luxury of having that conversation in the clinic, because usually I'm focused more on the sort of the medical and the nutritional piece. Okay, so those are my pearls of wisdom: the schedule, time-limited meals, calorie-limited snacks. Let your child be hungry, and let your child self-regulate. Let your child discover what it means to be hungry and discover what it means to be filled. And don't decide for your child how many calories are needed to do that. Your child has to figure that out himself or herself. For me, it's a really important piece. It's also an obesity prevention strategy, frankly, because then you know yourself for your own body, what feels full and what feels empty, what feels hungry and what feels sated. And then have a good repertoire of foods available, and your kid will probably eat them.
When you think about liquids, like pushing liquids, is it okay to push water, milk, like to make sure they're drinking enough, or should you still kind of offer it the same way you offer food?
You could start out the meal by offering something to drink first. That would be easy. One trap you can fall into that toddlers sometimes fall into is they're drinking juice all day long, which cuts the appetite. So you just want to have some control over it. Water is probably the healthiest thing to drink. Milk is very good to drink, but I wouldn't do more than 24 ounces a day just because the calorie count gets too high.
My daughter sometimes she'll want to drink water while she's eating, but she'll want to drink so much that she doesn't want to eat any more food. She gets really full from the water.
Yeah.
So just my
she'll get hungry at the next meal.
Yeah, that's true.
Sorry.
So that's my reward for my child. I don't call it that, but that's how I get him to eat the unpreferred food, the milk or the water. Eat like a drink of milk, sure. Go ahead and eat 2 more bites. You get your milk, and then he washes it down because he loves milk, and that's why he keeps gaining the weight, is because he eats that or drinks that, but just the 24 ounces. So we're just like, okay, so he'll do like 2 gulps and then a bite and like that, and he'll just be like, you know, but he has a hard time swallowing the food and all of these other things. But that's one of the things that helped us like a lot. Another thing was he helps me make the food, and sitting as a group, like a family, was the other one that really blew my mind. I didn't know how much that affected him to actually, you know, grab the big, you know, spoon or whatever and pour it on his plate. This is what I want, and then his all done bowl. So if he didn't want it, instead of throwing it at me or something, he puts it in the all done bowl, and it made a whole lot of difference, you know. And then the bingo game was, you know, the icing to the cake.
Yeah,
it's still really hard.
Yeah, but you're saying you had to go through this sort of you're describing a bit of an incentive program to encourage eating.
Right. Without doing whipped cream, because before it was like whipped cream. We started with like.
No, but the reason you had to do this was because there was weight loss?
Yeah, because he wasn't eating.
Well, but was there weight loss?
There was no weight loss. He just didn't gain weight.
There wasn't any gain in weight. Yeah.
Yeah, and but mine was very, you know, like I don't think anybody could. Maybe there is, but mine was very severe. That, I mean, he literally only ate like eggs, the good stuff, eggs, peanut butter, bread. So then we had to start switching brands and making him eat different, you know, breads, because and it was whole grain, because it was just
right. But you were using the glacial pace, which, you know, the really slow pace, right? But it sounds like the degree of sensitivities was such that you wouldn't have been able to go any faster. Is my impression from what you're saying. Yeah, right. It's rare. It's rare that you should have to do it, and it's not. You don't want to really have so many contingencies around eating, because again, that there's a chance that that's going to create negative associations. But frankly, some kids really don't eat properly, and to the point where they're really compromising themselves, and then they need to sort of look at this much more carefully. But I leave those kind of strategies, I really leave up to the feeding specialists. Those are the ones that I would refer to an OT or to a speech pathologist who's familiar with this, and they would set up a program like that. That's not a level of detail that I'm usually able to get into in my office. Yeah. Other questions or comments before we finish up? Go ahead.
I just wanted to say, last year you had also mentioned. They asked the question if we should spoon feed our children, and
spoon feeding, yes, right.
And I loved your answer, because I was on that track, but some of the other caregivers were not in my children's life. So, and it's still a struggle. But your answer was you feed babies, and I was like, thank you. So they weren't babies.
And even babies can tell you when they're hungry. But we do spoon feed them. Yeah. But babies don't know how to hold a spoon, and if they want to eat solid food, you have to spoon feed them. Yeah. No, I think the other part that isn't always obvious, but food has an incredibly deep amount of meaning, both culturally but also as a parent. It's one of the things that it feels like one of the most instinctual primary things you've got to do is make sure your kid eats, and to not see your kid eat. And to not see your kid eat is really, it can make you feel very uncomfortable.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately we all want them to eat, but they need to learn to self-regulate, like you said, eat on their own.
Right. Yeah.
You gotta get them there to do that.
But I remember an aunt of mine, this is very anecdotal now, being so proud of her grandson because he eats so well. I thought, is that what we should be proud of? But she also went through 2 world wars and was really deprived of nutrition for parts of her life. And so it's a very different, we don't have to worry about that here and now.
I see that in my family a lot. I see people saying, well, he's a good eater, or she's a good eater.
Right.
She likes to eat everything.
Yeah.
She eats all her food. Like, it's such a big deal to have a good eater.
Right.
And then you feel like such a failure because your kid's like not a good
eater. So really pay attention to that, because the good eater thing is really great if there's a risk of your child dying before the age of 5, which up until about 100 years ago was very common, right? So it was really important for the children to be good eaters. Now it's actually the risk is actually the flip, is like we're worried about obesity much more, and you don't want them to eat more calories than they really need. So the table is kind of turned. That's the price you pay for living in a land of plenty.
I have a question about milk. I'm sure if anybody else has this problem, but my 4-year-old kind of stopped drinking milk at like 1 and 1.5 years old. I mean, he didn't really drink. I mean,
So
I
you're
breastfed him until 1, and then so about till 1.5. I mean,
your current 4-year-old only drank
Yeah.
milk up to the age of 1.5. Wasn't interested in transitioning to a bottle. Yeah.
No, I mean, he just in general doesn't really prefer milk or like milk or ask for it. I think it's milk in general. Like even oatmeal, I used to make oatmeal with milk, farina with milk, without, just to have that extra protein in there or whatever. And I stopped. He stopped wanting to eat it, so I took the milk out. I mean, I don't think he has any allergy to it, but I think he just generally just doesn't prefer milk, even if it's cooked in something.
Could be. And he's doing okay or not okay? Yeah.
I mean, he's very tiny. He's like on the
He's a little kid. Yeah.
He's growing though. He's in now the 15th percentile for weight or 20th. He's growing though.
50th or 20th percentile is great for this pediatrician, but I don't know where he came from. Let's stop, okay? But I want to find out what happens next month if any of you tried any of these suggestions, if it goes anywhere, okay? Again, I can't give you advice for your own child, but you'll see what works for your child and talk about it with your pediatrician and ask the pediatrician to show you the growth curve.
I
It
do
might
want
be
to say
really
for my
informative.
oldest kid, everything that you said today, that I applied for the one that's not the selective eater, like super, like the little one, it all works.
Terrific.
Now he knows like, oh, if I'm gonna be starving if I don't, he knows his snack, and he's like super, he'll eat from tuna all the way,
Wow, good. Great.
Now he's a good eater.
Now he's a good eater. Okay, good. All right, I'll see you next month.